Imagine this. You're lying in a hospital bed, delirious, your body rotting from the inside out. The man who orchestrated death for millions now finds himself helpless, denied the very medicine that could have saved him, by his own ideology. First, he laughed at the idea of danger, riding through Prague in an open car, daring his enemies to strike, and they did. But the grenade didn't kill him. His own ideology did. The Nazis had banned the medicine that could have saved him. Today, we're going to explore 3 shocking stories about Reinhard Heydrich, one of the most feared men in the Nazi regime. Each story reveals a different side of how the man nicknamed the Hangman met his fate. From unexpected betrayals to fatal miscalculations, these stories will show you how even the most powerful figures can be brought down by their own actions. If you think you know everything about the end of this notorious figure, stick around. What you're about to learn might surprise you. If you're fascinated by history's darkest twists of fate, hit that subscribe button now. What's coming next might change how you see power forever. Imagine you're untouchable, feared by millions, protected by the Nazi war machine, living in a mansion while entire nations bow in terror. Reinhard Heydrich was that man, the mastermind behind the final solution, Hitler's so-called perfect Aryan. But power breeds arrogance, and arrogance invites fate. One morning, as he left his home in Prague, he didn't know he was being hunted. 2 Czechoslovak paratroopers, trained by the British, lay in wait on his usual route. The plan was perfect, the execution messy. The grenade thrown at his car didn't kill him instantly, but the shrapnel did its work, and then came the real horror. As he lay in the hospital, doctors scrambled to save him. Not because they cared, but because no one wanted to be responsible for failing Hitler's executioner. Yet fate had a different plan. An infection took hold, an infection that, in an ironic twist, could have been stopped with antibiotics, medicine the Nazis had banned for being Jewish science. Heydrich, the architect of mass murder, lay delirious in a hospital bed, his body rotting from the inside out. When he finally died, Hitler himself was furious. Not because he cared about Heydrich, but because he saw weakness. What would you do if you discovered the very system you built was about to destroy you? Drop a comment below and share your most shocking betrayal story. Heydrich was a monster, but even monsters have their own nightmares. His, the paranoia of power. The more ruthless he became, the more enemies he made. And those enemies weren't just the allies, they were his own colleagues. He was SS through and through, but there was a problem. Other top Nazis didn't trust him. He was too ambitious, too smart, too good at what he did. Himmler saw him as a threat. Göring hated his arrogance. Even Hitler, the man he worshipped, kept him at arm's length. In the twisted world of Nazi politics, survival wasn't about loyalty. It was about knowing when to strike first. There were whispers, plans to sideline him, maybe even eliminate him. He sensed it. He knew his enemies were waiting for the right moment. So he worked harder, pushing himself to the limit, hoping that if he was indispensable, they wouldn't dare turn on him. But it didn't matter. The moment he was gone, they erased him like he never existed. If this story of betrayal shocked you, smash that like button and help spread the truth about one of history's most twisted figures. There had been a betrayal. His fellow SS officers, the men who were supposed to avenge him, barely lifted a finger. They saw his death not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. The man who had built the Nazi machine had been crushed by it. Heydrich thought he was invincible. The most powerful men in the Third Reich feared him. He played the violin, adored his family, and believed himself to be a cultured man, while ordering the slaughter of millions. But in the end, the people he despised the most got the final laugh. After his death, the Allies exhumed and studied his body for research. His grave, unmarked, forgotten, erased. The man who built a system designed to erase others from history became a footnote himself. But there's more to this story that few people know. In the months leading up to his assassination, Heydrich had grown increasingly confident in his position within Nazi Germany. As the newly appointed Deputy Reich Protector of Bohemia and Moravia, he believed he had finally secured his place in Hitler's inner circle. This confidence would prove to be his undoing. The operation to eliminate him, codenamed Operation Anthropoid, wasn't just a lucky shot. It was the result of months of careful planning by the Czech resistance and British intelligence. The paratroopers who carried out the attack, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, knew they were likely embarking on a suicide mission. They understood that success meant certain death, not just for them, but for hundreds of innocent civilians in retribution. What made Heydrich's downfall even more remarkable was his complete dismissal of security protocols. Despite being one of the most protected men in the Third Reich, he routinely traveled in an open-top Mercedes-Benz without an armed escort. He kept the same schedule, took the same routes, and ignored multiple warnings about potential assassination attempts. This wasn't just arrogance, it was a fatal miscalculation born from years of unchecked power. The infection that ultimately killed him came from horsehair stuffing from the car's seat, which had been driven into his body by the explosion. Modern medical knowledge suggests that a simple course of antibiotics could have saved his life. But the Nazi regime's rejection of what they called Jewish science meant that many modern medical treatments were unavailable. The very ideology he helped create became his executioner. In the aftermath of his death, the Nazi response was brutal but revealing. Hitler ordered savage reprisals, including the complete destruction of the village of Lidice. But behind closed doors, many Nazi officials saw Heydrich's death as convenient. He had accumulated too much power, too much knowledge, and too many enemies. Some even whispered that certain elements within the SS had deliberately delayed sending medical specialists to Prague. Perhaps the most telling detail about Heydrich's legacy is what happened to his family. His wife Lena, once a prominent figure in Nazi social circles, found herself increasingly isolated after his death. His children, raised to believe in their father's vision of Aryan supremacy, would live to see that vision crumble completely. The man who had orchestrated so much death left behind a family that would spend decades trying to reconcile with his legacy. The weapons used in his assassination, a modified British Sten submachine gun and a specially adapted anti-tank grenade, are now displayed in Prague's Army Museum. They stand as silent witnesses to how the most feared man in the Reich was brought down not by a massive military operation, but by two determined resistance fighters with improvised weapons. The last piece of irony? The operation to kill him nearly failed. The submachine gun jammed at the crucial moment, and the grenade explosion initially seemed ineffective. It was only Heydrich's insistence on confronting his attackers rather than fleeing that ensured the shrapnel would reach him. Even in his final moments, his own arrogance sealed his fate. His death marked a turning point in World War II, demonstrating that even the highest-ranking Nazi officials were vulnerable. The successful assassination emboldened resistance movements across occupied Europe and showed that the Nazi regime's grip on power wasn't as absolute as they claimed. But the greatest irony? His legacy was one of failure. The final solution didn't save the Reich. It accelerated its destruction. The Czech resistance, the people he thought were beneath him, orchestrated his downfall. And the Allies ensured that men like him would be remembered not as heroes, but as warnings. In the end, Reinhard Heydrich, the so-called perfect Aryan, wasn't perfect at all. He was just another name on a long list of tyrants who thought they could outrun their own fate. Want more stories about history's most notorious figures getting their comeuppance? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.